There are literally offices of people over in, maybe different countries, maybe domestically, where their sole objective every day when they wake up is figuring out how am I going to hack into some sort of brokerage system.
Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the #1 voice of supply chain. Join us as we share critical news, key insights, and real supply chain leadership from across the globe, one conversation at a time.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and the one and only Kym Reuter with you here on Supply Chain Now. Hey, Kym, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
Outstanding. Better than fantastic. Is outstanding a little better than fantastic? I'm not sure.
Are we going to outdo each other now on who's doing better?
Yes. Folks, we got a great show here today. Great show with a great guest, and I can't wait to hear Kym's take on this discussion. But we're diving into the hot topic of freight fraud. We're going to be sharing some recent examples of these growing fraudulent activities that are hitting organizations everywhere. But Kym, there's good news, because technology and proven best practices and innovative best practices are helping supply chain pros fight back. Today, we're going to be offering up some ways that your supply chain organization can better secure its freight, amongst other things. In particular, we're dialing in on the broker world and offering up some proven tips for how brokers across industry can prevent fraud and theft and find a whole bunch more success. Kym, you've been a mover and shaker in supply chain leadership circles for many years. We're looking forward to your input and expertise today. Should be a great show, huh?
Thank you. Yes. Trucking is high on my list of favorite things. So looking forward to discussing.
I'm with you. I am with you. And folks, if you enjoyed today's show, be sure to share it with your friend or your network. They'll be glad you did. All right, Kym, are you ready to get down to work and welcome in our guest here today?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's roll. I want to welcome in our esteemed guest, Kary Jablonski, Vice President and General Manager of Broker Growth at Trucker Tools. Hey, Kary, how you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. So great to have you. And it was a blast to connect with you for a few minutes at Manifest a couple months back. We blink and we're almost in April. Isn't that crazy how it happens?
It is crazy. The year is flying by already.
It is. But Kary and the Trucker Tools team is on the move. More about that in just a second. Kym, we've done our homework on one Kary Jablonski, and we've uncovered some things as we start with a fun warm-up question. Let's see here. We understand not only do you call one of the greatest cities, Kym's favorite, Chicago, home, but you also have a passion for running, golfing, and basketball. So I got to ask you, and I was just in Chicago at ProMat last week or so, loved it. Ate our way around the city, I tell you. But Kary, out of those activities, what's one of your favorite places to get outdoors and soak in the sunshine when it's there in Chicago?
Yeah. I mean, so many awesome places just right in the city. I'd say my favorite thing to do is really anything right on the lakefront. So we live downtown, very close to Lake Michigan, and there's a beautiful running path, runs for, 17 or 18 miles up and down the lakeshore. There's a great 9-hole golf course that we play a lot. So I just love getting out there. I go to the beach a lot in the city during the summer. Contrary to popular belief, it is a real sand beach. So there's plenty to do.
There is plenty to do. We could not, Kym, speaking of, that's one of your favorite cities of Chicago. Kary just named a bunch of things. She's a wonderful Chicago ambassador. We were there in and out, me and Amanda last time, so we didn't get a chance to do a whole bunch. But what's one of your favorite things to do when you get up to Chicago, Kym?
I am a big fan of architecture, so I just love wandering around Chicago, the canal tours. I'm a big fan of the old waterworks buildings. So that's my favorite thing to do in Chicago, because I'm normally cooped up in a room, 72 degrees and fluorescent lights. So I get outside as much as I can. But that is my favorite thing to do in Chicago.
Oh, Kym, I love it. One last Chicago-related thing. Let's see. We ate at Portillo's, Kary?
Yes, Portillo's. That's a classic.
I don't want to throw any stones because the food was delicious, but we got to work with them on the ordering process, okay? We went at middle of the day, prime lunchtime, and I didn't know what was going on. But delicious food and a classic, as you mentioned, huh?
Oh, yeah. If you want a Chicago dog, that's the place to go. I personally am more partial to deep dish pizza than Chicago dogs. Lou Malnati's, it's my spot.
Ooh, okay.
Nice.
I got demerits for going to the wrong place, as I was told by a fellow Chicagoan, but we'll cover that later. But Kary, great to have you, and looking forward to your expertise on all things supply chain. Kary, I want to do some level setting first, Kary and Kim. I want to start with you, Kary. Tell us briefly, if you would, about Trucker Tools and a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So Trucker Tools is a visibility software tool for freight brokers and carriers. We serve to provide end-to-end visibility to brokers throughout the entire life cycle of a load. So finding a carrier, booking a carrier through a tool like DAT, then you need to actually track that truck. That's what we do. We do it through our mobile app for carriers. It's been around since 2010. Massive carrier network on there, really beloved by owner operators and small fleets. We also have tens of thousands of ELD carrier integrations. So that's become a really hot, popular way to track by brokers.
Yeah, I'll tell you, powerful tool, and you're not a new kid on the block. Clearly, y'all have got a great track record. And I'll tell you, in an exciting development, Kary, Trucker Tools was acquired by the DAT organization. So share a few, I doubt this changes much except give you more power and more rocket fuel. But how has this changed Trucker Tools' trajectory moving forward and your approach to fraud maybe?
Yeah, so generally, I think you're exactly right. The acquisition, which happened in December, has really just served to bring us even closer to our end customers and those customers we're trying to sell into. So for those of you who aren't familiar with DAT, it is North America's largest load marketplace and load board for brokers. They have a really incredible network on both the broker and the carrier side. So the acquisition allows us now to introduce Trucker Tools as another step in that software toolkit for brokers to automate a lot of the work they're doing and find great carriers to work with. So it's really been a boon for us to get in front of more brokers and introduce our tool to more folks. And what's beautiful about our product at Trucker Tools is that as more brokers use it and more carriers use it, it actually strengthens the quality of the end product, which is that visibility. So there's been a lot of beautiful initial synergies from the acquisition. We've also got our teams integrated together pretty quickly, and again continuing to really double down on our fraud toolkit that I know we'll talk about later. DAT has obviously been really focused on fraud prevention and reduction as well. So it's been a very natural couple of months that we've been working together.
Well, I feel better that DAT and Trucker Tools are out in the good fight, fighting freight fraud, Kim. And stay tuned, folks. We're going to find a lot more about that. And Kim, the other thing that I understand about this wonderful move and growth stage with Trucker Tools is more data. And we're going to talk more about the second point in a second, more capabilities at proactive preventive measures. And Kim, we all need to be more proactive on a wide variety of things these days, huh?
Yes. As you know, I'm the queen of data, so love to hear that we're using data. That is the way to success. But yes, prevention is key. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but everything moves much faster now than it was 20, 25, even 10 years ago. So it's very important for us to be ahead of the bad actors.
Yes, I'm with you. And we're going to touch on more how velocity giveth and taketh away here later in the show as well. All right, Kary and Kim, there's a couple more things I want to add on as we're level setting here. Kary, speaking of great personalities, we had your colleague, Ken Adamo, join us about a month or so ago. And I think I can add this. He is pretty excited about taking the Trucker Tools data out for a spin. This was a recent, is it still called a tweet over on X? Whatever. Post on X. What do you see here, Kary?
Yeah, so Ken is awesome, and he's so fast to be able to take data and distill it into real impactful insights. This is something he did a couple weeks ago, where he was actually pulling what are all the loads where we have carriers tracking right now. And if you look in here, you can kind of see the hot spots. You see Dallas, you see Atlanta, you see the Chicagoland area, you see out in LA. And it just speaks to how powerful the Trucker Tools data set with all of the real-time information we have on carriers is. And what we're planning to do is actually figure out how we're going to really integrate that into the DAT platform so that our broker customers can take advantage of not just the DAT data set, the IQ data set, and analytics data set that really powers a lot of rates in the brokerage space, but also this additional layer of visibility and capacity data to make really informed decisions.
Okay, I love it. And two other things I'll point out here. Number one, I love Ken. He's a self-coined at the freight nerd. I love that. And he's got a great sense of humor, by the way. Okay, Kary and Kim, we got so much more to get to. But we want to dive into kind of the chief topic today, which is freight fraud. Now, folks, we probably don't have to tell you because we got the smartest audience in all of global supply chain. Freight fraud is a ubiquitous problem in the logistics industry right now. I'm not sure if I've ever used the word ubiquitous, but I even said it right. Now, some data suggests that annual losses due to freight fraud globally are upwards of $600, $700 million and growing. Now, Kary, that speaks volume in and of itself, but tell us more about why freight fraud is such a pressing concern, especially for today's brokers.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the number one theme in the industry for probably the last 3 years. If we go back a couple of years to 2019, market wasn't in great shape and then really boomed, the freight market specifically in 2020 and into 2021, and then crashed quite quickly. So if you talk to any brokers, the last 3 years have been among the toughest for them in likely recent memory or sometimes their careers. And it's introduced this entire new fraud vector too for a couple of reasons. The first is that we've just seen massive tech advances. So these tactics that fraudsters engage in are just becoming more and more advanced. There are literally offices of people over in, maybe different countries, maybe domestically, where their sole objective every day when they wake up is figuring out how am I going to hack into some sort of brokerage system. So there is really massive dedicated manpower and tech going into figuring out how to defraud freight brokers. And the real impact there is massive and financial for brokers. It's an existential thing. We've had some brokers actually over the last couple of years, they've gone out of business because they've had just one or too many either stolen loads or double brokering schemes, a payment scam that either damages customer trust, so they lose a big customer, or really in brokerage, which is such a tight margin operation and cash is really, really critical. Can't make a payment and actually have to declare bankruptcy. So it's been a really tough couple of years, and it is ultimately not just on brokers, but on everyone involved, carriers, brokers, shippers, to come up with a solution to secure the industry.
Kary, I appreciate your opening salvo there. Two things before I get Kim's comment. Number one incident, to your point, can be devastating to our brokers and really many members of the supply chain ecosystem, which takes into the second point, which is kind of one of the things you finished on there. It's incumbent and inherent on all of us to do something about this growing problem of freight fraud. And folks, we're going to share some different examples. You may be assuming it's just one, but it's many things. Kim, comment on why it's such a big problem right now.
Just to frame it up a little bit, so an import container can be worth anywhere from $30,000 a container to several $100,000 in a container, depending on what the commodity is. So being able to just take a 40-footer can be a very lucrative opportunity for a bad actor. So freight fraud has been around since we have moved freight. Like, we have been dealing with stolen freight, replaced freight, gray market goods, all of this since the beginning of time. But as we're going to talk about a little bit more, technology and the way that our supply chains work now has certainly heightened that risk.
Yes, well said. Well said. It's all fun and games on movies like Goodfellas, but it is a serious and growing problem with lots and lots of victims. Okay, so Kary, for more context, what are some of the more common types of fraudulent activities that you've been seeing in the freight space here in recent years?
There's really three that we see most frequently. And the first is double brokering. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, what happens is there's a bad actor who's impersonating a carrier and accepting a load from a broker, and then rebrokers that load to another carrier without telling that original broker who brokered the load. That can lead to payment disputes, liability issues, and many times actually stolen loads if the second carrier never gets paid. So in these cases, you really end up leaving that original broker out to dry and that carrier who's been defrauded. So impacting both sides of the marketplace there. The second is cargo theft, pretty self-explanatory. This is where you've got bad actors who pose as legitimate carriers, pick up loads, and then disappear. There are a lot of things that go into actually impersonating identity. So falsified paperwork, it can get really difficult to track down this freight. And this is where we see there's some really interesting companies in the space who are doing a lot of good work to track down stolen cargo. And this is where we also really need partnership from the government and from organizations like the FBI. And then finally, we do see identity theft and carrier impersonation. This is something we've really locked down at DAT, and I can talk more about that. But this is where fraudsters steal MC numbers or DHT credentials. They do a phishing scheme where they get someone to click on a bad link via email, and then they're able to hack into their credentials and pose as legit carriers. So then brokers might tender a load to that bad actor, and then again leads downstream to potentially stolen freight.
Ripple effect, ripple effect, ripple effect. All right, so Kim, Kary touched on double brokering. She touched on cargo theft, and she touched on identity theft and carrier impersonation. Your thoughts?
So obviously cargo theft is always the biggest, right? That's the biggest risk. And we talk about the financial loss, but if you're a truck broker, you may be making a couple $100 a load on your freight markup. So if you lose $100,000 container and you have to pay for that, that could really wipe out, that could potentially wipe out a company. If you lose two, it could definitely wipe out a company. Yes, they have insurance to cover them, but you lose trust throughout the industry. Now, other truckers are leery doing business with you because are you a legit broker or are you a scammer now? You're associated with this. You're going to lose your customer. So the margins on truck brokering are not massive. No one out there is becoming an overnight millionaire doing truck brokering. So the risk is really, really high.
And Kary, you were nodding your head as Kim was making those points. And before I switch over to how modern technology is changing the game a bit, any last word there, Kary?
I just completely agree with Kim. The risk here is so great for brokers that I think it speaks to the need. Could segue into our next topic of technology, brokers to really, really shore up their defenses and be very thoughtful and potentially a little bit paranoid and over defensive to make sure that they protect their business.
Yes. And folks, stay tuned. There's good news coming, I promise. Kary's going to be sharing some things brokers can do, supply chain leaders can do, you name it, to fight back more effectively. And let's start with how modern technology, as we keep level setting a bit more, how modern technology has changed the tactics used by all these fraudsters out there. Kary?
Yeah, it's really a double-edged sword because, like I said earlier, tech is what has enabled bad actors to move so much faster and to experiment with different potential fraudulent vectors and infiltrating brokerages and impersonating identity. On the flip side, though, there is a ton of great technology out there. It's getting developed every single day to support brokers and carriers and really, again, shoring up their defenses and making sure that the systems they're using are secured and locked down. So if we're talking about, again, just to go back to some of the examples that we see often, identity theft, it's really, quite frankly, pretty easy for a bad actor to steal a carrier identity and manipulate some fake documents, create fake certificates of insurance, doctor a rate con. So it's just that much more critical that brokers really not only have spent time investing in technology to help them verify those documents, but also training their teams on here are the common patterns we see with bad actors, and here's what you need to be thoughtful about doing when you're looking at a COI, for example. Another frequent fraud vector into scamming a brokerage is phone and email spoofing. So it's really easy. You get a VoIP, you got a device scrambler, you can impersonate a legitimate carrier, and it just makes verifying who that person is on the other end of the phone that much more difficult. And again, it is all happening so quickly now with the pace of tech rolling out, and it requires brokers to be really nimble. And that's why technology partners have become even ever more critical in the brokerage space. The brokerage space has grown massively over the last 25 years. Billions and billions of dollars of freight is moved on the spot market and brokered every single day that may in the past either wouldn't have moved or would have been a contracted load, which has just led to this entire other ecosystem of brokerage-specific tech to support and really help brokers secure what they're focused on. So, real-time visibility like we do at Trucker Tools, compliance checks, and a really, really strong carrier vetting process is an absolute non-negotiable if you're a broker in today's world.
Absolute. Table stakes have also been changing. Kim, when I think of the business philosophy that Kary called out, because we talk about that a lot, but what I think a lot of folks out there don't talk enough about is how the growing modern business philosophy that giveth and taketh away, it also speeds up, to Kary's point, it makes the fraud cycles even faster. So not only do you have to have, of course, the proactive side is always going to be important, but how we react when we see the red flags and we get notifications and we put one and one together. We got to move fast. But Kim, what'd you hear there from Kary?
The one thing I would add to this is that we have more and more small players in the market, from shippers and truckers. So we have more and more companies who are not adept in identifying problems early on. So if you're a very small shipper who maybe only started selling on Amazon and you've got your first big truckload coming to get picked up, you're super excited, you don't know what to look for. You don't know if that looks a little dodgy because it really wasn't supposed to show up in a white van to load your cargo. So we have more and more inexperienced people, both on the trucking side and also on the shipper and vendor side, entering the market. So we have less experience and we still have, or even more, an elevated risk at this point.
Yeah, great points there. Great points. The people factor, right? The beautiful human factor, which we love talking about here, but it comes with different tweaks of the risk that we're all talking about here, Kary and Kim. All right. Partner reliance. Kary, I want you to tell us more about partner reliance and how you've seen fraud impact the relationship you have with brokers.
Yeah, in the past, pre this really Cambrian explosion of brokerage tech, if you will, we saw fraud prevention in the brokerage space is really an internal process. So brokers would have their carrier list that they'd vet them manually. They'd really operate on gut and figure out, hey, is this guy a good actor? Do I have a good relationship with him? But again, as fraud has become so much more sophisticated and tech enabled, brokers have begun to need, and the market has begun to provide real-time data, tools, and alerting to stay ahead of potential bad actors. I'll mention, of course, real-time visibility. This is exactly what Trucker Tools does. And we see brokers now really increasingly rely on tech partners to provide live tracking, instant carrier verification, and fraud detection in real time to catch suspicious activity before it escalates. I mentioned our ELD network earlier. That is something that we're really, really proud of. We built awesome integrations with tens of thousands of carriers. And in the couple of years that we've been providing telematics and ELD tracking, we have never experienced a report of a stolen load by a carrier who was using their ELD device to track with us, which just speaks to how critical it is to really try to build those tight integrations with carriers and the tech they're using. Brokers are also, just a couple other thoughts on how brokers are thinking about this emerging fraud tech ecosystem. They're looking for integrated solutions. The TMS is really the lifeblood of any broker. And they're looking for load boards and visibility tools and compliance tools that flag risks automatically and proactively to them in that TMS. And something else we're seeing too is that brokers are also, and this is something we're doing at Trucker Tools, beginning to demand proactivity and thinking about how can I proactively manage exceptions as opposed to being reactive and having tech just tell me when something bad happened. So again, we've got our Trucker Tools fraud toolkit that we launched back in the fall. We've now got 6 or 7 alerts out in market right now where we're telling end users ahead of time, as soon as we are aware that, hey, we just noticed this driver switch to use a VoIP phone, or hey, there's a spoofer in use here, or hey, we're hitting an offshore data center now. You're going to want to look into this. And the way we've developed those alerts is we've actually talked to our customers and said, what are the indicators, or what have we learned after you've seen a load get compromised or a bad actor? And we've built alerts based on those data patterns, and we're continually refining what we're pulling forth and alerting brokers about based on what they're telling us, which really just speaks to the evolution of the broker tech freight broker relationship, which is really has to be symbiotic and built to be really, really responsive to the changes we're seeing in the market.
Yeah. Kary, it is equally as exciting as a terrifying time as both the good technology in the good hands continues to evolve, as well as technology in the bad actors' hands. But Kim, a couple things Kary mentioned there, besides one aspect of a sterling track record, sounds like Kary and the team have, is that greater demand, of course, where she started for more real-time visibility, but also which fuels real-time ability to make decisions and take action, which is connected to one of the last points she mentioned, which we touched. This is going to be a big theme, shifting from pure reactive mode to proactive mode. So you're dealing with less on the reactive side, right? Your thoughts there, Kim? What we heard from Kary.
So we were talking a little bit about partner reliance, and when you're a broker, it is all about partnership, right? Because you don't own the trucks, you're brokering out your freight. It is all about partnership. So I've been in this business a hot minute, as we like to say. And back when I was using brokers, way back in the day, we didn't have all of this technology. So the truckers that they used were typically someone they'd use. They worked with them. They partnered with them for years and years and years. They had relationships. That was kind of how truck brokering worked back then. And I'm not sure if AOT Transportation in Baltimore, Maryland is still around, but that was my number one truck broker. It stood for always on time. And so with technology, what we're seeing is smaller and smaller players are getting access to bigger and bigger freight. So previously, you had to earn that spot to get the $150,000 load, right? You worked up through a broker, you earned a reputation, et cetera, et cetera. Now I can go out, get my CDL, and next week I can jump into a pool through technology and try to get the most expensive load I can have. I may have only pulled for, 1,000 miles. I don't have any experience. So is that the kind of person you want to put on a high value load? So again, technology, as Kary was talking about, is double-edged sword. We've now opened up trucking to just about anybody with a CDL.
Oh, Kim, it sounds like you got some stories there. We're going to get out on a future episode.
We need to have a drink, and I can tell you some stories.
But Kary, I loved AOT, always on time. I remember that one. But also, Kary, you've mentioned VoIP a couple times. And for folks out there that may not have a voice and data background or technology background, voice over internet protocol, I think is that acronym.
That's right.
To Kary's point, it does make things more susceptible to modern technology and modern bad actors. So, and that deserves its own entire show. Kary, brokers in the U.S. equals freight forwarders in Europe. Would you generally agree or disagree with that?
Not quite. So freight forwarders are generally doing country to country freight. So they're moving freight from one nation to another, whereas in the U.S., a broker is a domestic, and sometimes they'll do cross-border, but primarily domestic manager of transportation. So we don't deal with customs or any of that, which is really the key function of a freight forwarder.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Kim and Kary, we got to keep driving. We got a lot more good stuff here today. Now, tech is here to stay, right? We're not putting that genie back in the bottle. And in many ways, I'm very happy with that. In other ways, it does bring more complexity and risk. But undeniably, it's getting better and better for, I guess, all parties. Brokers are always going to rely on technology partners for assistance with many things, to include fraud prevention. So, Kary, from your experience working with some of today's most successful brokers, what's some advice that you would give to other brokerages on fraud prevention best practices?
Yeah, well, I want to pull in a thread that Kim mentioned, which was that it is incredible the explosion of carriers into the market who are working specifically with brokers, generally small carriers, over the last 10 to 15 years. Throughout COVID, we saw an increase, or pre-COVID, we were seeing kind of a steady increase. And then COVID really just massively accelerated the entrance of new carriers who just thought, let me go buy a truck and I'll be making money hand over fist. Obviously, that is not the case, given what's been happening in the brokerage and freight markets over the last couple of years. But we're still seeing way, way, way more carriers in operation now, and generally smaller carriers than we did, call it 15, 20 years ago. With that, I think the number one thing that any broker needs to do to really think about, and where they need to start with this whole concept of a fraud prevention strategy, is focus on building a trusted carrier network. Again, fraudsters are looking to exploit a desperate broker, and it's kind of the name of the game. And just the everyday life of a broker is they handle last minute, tough to automate, difficult to cover freight. So they've kind of chosen wisely. If you're a bad actor, it is a good spot to play in. But the number one thing brokers can do is really focus on shoring up that carrier network. Freight's a relationship business. You can use technology to really enhance and see, who are my best carriers? How do I make sure that we're sending more freight to them? How do I make sure I'm sending the right freight to them that they're more likely to accept? There's a ton that we do at Trucker Tools and DAT to automate those processes so that brokers can get more of the high quality freight in front of their high quality carriers. There's a lot of other things that brokers can do too. We talked about real-time visibility with fraud alerting, ELD tracking, like we have at Trucker Tools. Building a really strong onboarding process is something else that every broker needs to do. That helps weed out fraud before it happens. So verifying MC and DOT numbers and actually using a technology provider. This is something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about at DAT. One of the main use cases for brokers with DAT is to come in and post a load that they need covered, and then they get a ton of inbound volume from carriers. So we're thinking about how do we actually move that vetting process to the beginning of the load booking cycle. So how do we think about ensuring that high value loads are only posted and visible to carriers who have certain criteria that you as the broker are in direct control of? And that's what we're working on right now. It's coming to life later this year as part of our carrier management suite. I think it'll be another phenomenal tool in the toolkit of fraud prevention.
There's so much you mentioned there that I think needs to ring in people's ears and maybe their eyeballs out there. But Kim, perhaps my favorite kind of goes back to what your point you made a moment or two ago, and that's how we strengthen carrier vetting and build more trust and relationships so we can do what Kary mentioned, match up that high quality freight with those highly trusted carriers and all freight, but especially some more critical loads where lives might be on the line if we don't have the right approach, vetting and many other things. But Kim, what'd you hear there from Kary?
So, just to back up what Kary said about the increase in owner operators and small truckers, that's 5 tractors or less. We've seen almost a double in the last 5 years in the number of owner operators and small operators. So up to about over 700,000, up from 400,000 in 2020. So more and more this entrepreneurial spirit, the gig society, our gig economy, et cetera, people are moving into being owner operators or operating 1 or 2 trucks on their own. So we are seeing, as we keep talking about, we're seeing smaller and smaller players enter the space. Those people need to be vetted. Do we want to put, time critical medicine with someone who just got their CDL? Probably not. We don't want to give loads to a long haul trucker that's just going to be around the corner. He doesn't want it. That's not how he makes his money. So partnering with the right trucker, in addition to being a quality trucker, is very important. I've been moving freight for close to 30 years, and I can tell you there are truckers out there who like a run and will knock that run out of the park every single time because they like the guy at the door, whatever it is. They like that run. If you give them a run they don't want, they're going to be cranky the whole time. That's it.
Kim, you've been moving freight since 5 years old. Unbelievable. I'm going to tell you, unbelievable. All right, Kary, watching for red flags in load transactions is an important thing that I think you mentioned. And in 2025, about the only way we can do that is by leveraging powerful technology. Quick comment on that before I keep moving.
Yeah, I mean, it is the only way to scale up brokers right now is through tech. Brokerage, Kim was talking about it earlier, really low margin business. And kind of historically, the way you scale a brokerage is you hire more people. Okay, the average broker can book 5-6 loads a day. Let's just win a couple more loads from shippers with our sales team, and then we're going to start hiring more people to book them and track the carriers manually over the phone. That is not how brokerages scale anymore. And I think with the introduction of all of this brokerage-specific tech, we're seeing really a fundamental margin restructure in what brokerages are going to look like. And if a brokerage is operating as kind of in that older model of really, really human labor intensive for largely automatable and at least to be tech-enabled tasks, we're going to see those brokers not actually make it because there's such margin pressure now. And there's the ability for really more sophisticated brokers to scale using technology that legacy model just isn't going to work anymore.
That last phrase can apply to so many things in this fast-moving, evolving world. All these legacy models in supply chain and outside supply chain are losing their relevance. Good stuff there, Kary. All right, so we're going to get into a little bit more into carrier vetting and onboarding in just a second, how to improve those processes. But hey, in Europe, it's very common. It's a very common way to steal cargo is to replace 1 or 2 letters in the domain name to replicate the legitimate carrier name.
Super common here as well. And that I think it's about making sure the non-tech processes that go along with those tech solutions are followed. I think that's a great example. How can you as a broker train your team on, we need to be vigilant about looking at who is actually emailing us? Are we, is there something off about this Is it not from a Gmail, or is it from a Gmail? If so, we need to take an extra look at this and creating some sort of training and rule sets, especially for newer teams who are not
Yes.
used to that.
Well said, Kary. And what role, we were talking earlier, carrier vetting and onboarding, what role do these important activities play in fraud prevention? And better yet, how can brokers improve this critical process?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it really all starts. Like we talked about earlier, the number one thing a carrier or broker can do to secure their network is make sure they have strong, in-depth, data-driven relationships with those carriers. And it starts with vetting a carrier and onboarding them into your network. Something we're thinking a lot about at DAT is how to improve carrier vetting. And we think a major opportunity here is to actually move vetting into one system. Again, DAT, by far the largest load board in North America. If we bring vetting into that platform and really put it at the beginning of that freight procurement process or carrier procurement process for a broker, it's really going to change the game. And that's because bad actors exploit those fragmented processes where different vetting steps exist and tools. Carrier management suite that we're developing is going to bring that capability to vet those carriers into the load board so that you're able to not even let a bad actor, a potential bad fit carrier, potentially, Kim gave a great example, an unqualified carrier, someone who just got their operating authority, be really high value, important freight. That said, it's also really important to not just kind of have the same blanket set of rules for carriers. Taking that same example, really makes sense to have those trusted partners who you feel really confident working with on high value freight. Maybe for new carriers, you want work in some, cardboard style loads to start, require a little bit of additional manual verification with limited history with you. And think about how can we constantly be weeding out bad performers from our carrier network. You can flag carriers who aren't tracking loads consistently, frequent MC changes, prior fraud reports for extra security. A couple other things that I think are really critical when it comes to onboarding and vetting is that it doesn't actually stop when the carrier is onboarded. It's really, really important, again, because so much of this fraud happens post load booking, to have continuous monitoring about what's happening with the carrier, or, hey, I did a great load with this carrier a month ago, I'm going to use them again. You need to be really vigilant to make sure that something hasn't changed. So introducing continuous monitoring into what you're doing, that's something that we're adding into the carrier management tool set at DAT to be able to notify your team in real time when something has changed with the carrier. There's been an MC change or an email change. That will help you get ahead of any potential second, you're kind of lulled into this false sense of security by working with a carrier, running a clean load with them. You still need to be vigilant that second time around.
Yeah. Ask and we shall receive. Kary laid out a variety of ways we can improve. And did you hear that? An ongoing process. There's not a finish line. There might be at the end of a certain segment, but you start on the next part of it because things change, people change, companies change, their performance changes. And one of her last points there, monitoring real-time data, as well as that critical historical performance with a trusted data partner. Kim, what'd you hear there in just that last response from Kary?
So our focus is on fraud, preventing fraud, managing fraud, making sure you're partnering with the right people. But everything that we've talked about here too also impacts performance. So the worst thing that can happen in some cases is not that a container is stolen. It could actually be the worst situation is that it was late. And so everything that we've been talking about today, partnering with the right people, making sure that you're flagging for red flags, all of this, in addition to being fraud indicators, is also just performance indicators. Is this going to be a good partner for you? Is this someone that you can trust long term? Are they going to be there for you? And are they going to help you build your reputation as a broker? Because as a broker, you're reliant on their performance to make you look good. So everything that we're talking about today, yes, for fraud and for performance.
Well said, Kim. Well said. Everybody's got some risk. Everybody got some skin in the game, some more than others. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. Up to this point, we've really focused a lot around what's going on. We've defined the risk. We've talked a lot about the systems and what we need to instill in our ecosystems, especially from that proactive point of view, because there's so much opportunity there. With this next question, though, I want to get you to speak to what a broker should do if they suspect fraudulent carriers. So we still have to have best practices on the reactive side too, though, right? Tell us more, Kary.
First thing you got to do is freeze the load, pause any action. Do not pay. Do not get mixed up with rate cons. Just cancel the load, reassign it. If you do confirm that fraud is in place, but if it's already on the road, freeze it. Next, you want to really get into the details, verify those details, check carrier information wherever you can, call that carrier's dispatcher or driver directly using the phone number registered with the FMCSA. And if it's unreliable or inconsistent, it's a red flag. Then you really got to dig into what those red flags are. So if you go back into your history of booking this load, was there a last minute payment request? Was there something inconsistent that showed up in tracking? And that can help you start to figure out where did things go wrong here. After that, you need to report that suspicious carrier. If the load has been stolen, get the authorities involved, add them to watch list. TIA's watchdog program is great. And make sure you file a fraud report with your insurance provider to make sure that you're covered if there is any financial loss. And then after, you go through this, it's really a good moment to take a step back and kind of do a retro. What happened? What was our vetting process? How did this carrier slip through the cracks? And what else do you need to introduce? Do we need stronger tracking on loads? Do we need to revamp our onboarding process? Do we need to up our standards for carriers? It's a good opportunity to think that through.
Kary, I love it. And if I'm keeping notes here. I'm on my 17th page of notes from the one and only Kary Jablonski, and I got those here: freeze, verify, investigate, report, notify, review, and somewhere there, Kim, there's another acronym we can add to a global supply chain. But Kim, what you hear in Kary's advice on what to do with brokers when they suspect fraud is at play?
React quickly, I think, is the number one thing. Don't wait. If you suspect that there's fraud, get control of that load as fast as you can in whatever manner that you can and sort it out all later. What I see most often is people do see a red flag or suspect a red flag and don't react quickly enough and could have probably saved the cargo if they had gotten on top of it. But they're a little shy to react. And as we've been talking about, technology has made everything move way faster than it has ever moved before. So you need to react as quickly as possible.
Well said. Well said. You have the right partners to react not only fast, but taking the right actions. And better yet, when you got the right partners, kind of goes back to what Kary's saying, you can take the right proactive measures. There's less you got to act on in a reactive mode, right? And so you can put the 80-20 in play, which is so important as we prioritize everything we deal with every single day. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kary, you're going to get a very unfair question with this next one, because I don't know about you, but my crystal ball, Kim's hadn't been broken, but mine's been broken for a long time. I'm not going to go back and tell y'all what I predicted would go on with the tariff situation. But to be fair, a lot of us are surprised there. All right, looking ahead, Kary, I appreciate all that you shared thus far. What do you see as the biggest challenges for fraud in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of thoughts. And again, want to disclaim my crystal ball is not always the clearest either. But with what we do know, we'll take tariffs for an example. I think you make a great point, Scott, that none of us really knew how to expect or anticipate what was coming, and that uncertainty and volatility that is introduced into the market is something that is going to continue to make brokerage critical, because with more uncertainty comes more last minute or pivoting needs from shippers and carriers. So potential great opportunity for brokers. At the same time, it's going to force brokers to have to pivot a bit on their carrier strategies. They may have to explore some new relationships with new carriers. They may need to expand their pool in certain areas. If a load's coming in from Mexico, for an example, and you've got new vendors in Detroit, there's a lot of new evolving opportunity there. And with that comes some introduced fraudulent activity and risk, just because, like we talked about earlier, ad nauseum, the most important thing in securing your network is really building strong carrier relationships. So I think the biggest, carrier is just top of mind, tariffs are just top of mind for everyone right now, and ensuring that you're being extra vigilant given the volatility that's introduced into the market is what I see as one of the big themes of this year.
Excellent points there, Kary. And Kim, I don't know about you, but I don't think Kary's crystal ball is broken at all. I think it's working better than she thinks. I would just add, I saw a great article the other day, and it was a retail leader that was giving her response, kind of her take on what we're seeing tariff-wise. And she used this phrase, which I felt in my bones. We're dealing with the rules of the moment. These sands are shifting almost hour by hour, and it's very difficult for any organization to figure out where to put those permanent pilings as they look for a new foundation, right? Kim, so much here. You're going to get another unfair question because Kary has shared a lot of excellent perspective, been there, done that perspective. We're going to share some resources in just a second. But what is, and you coined this in the green room, a Kimmy keeper? I'm going to steal that from you. So what is your patented key takeaway from today's conversation with Kary Jablonski?
So we are going to see an increase in small carriers. We're going to see an increase in brokerage, everything that Kary just talked about with the shifting supply chain, the tariffs. We have people front loading now. We have people canceling orders, everything. We have spikes, we have valleys. The ocean freight carriers are trying to figure out what they're trying to do. The market is very volatile. We will continue to see more and more brokerage. We will continue to see the bigger trucking companies continue to consolidate or go away. Just the heaviness of managing that kind of operation becomes more and more risky as we have more and more of a risky supply chain. So managing fraud, figuring out how you're going to work with smaller and smaller carriers is going to be key to success. For anyone, it's going to give you the ability to pivot. It's going to give you the ability to move into markets that you would otherwise not be able to get into. And it's going to be key for logistics success. So you need to be smart about who you're working with, because the other end of that is there will be more and more brokers, which means there will be more and more competition. So it will be more and more important to protect your brand and protect your customers.
Yes. And to do what you're suggesting, you've got to have the right system, the platform, the relationships, a protected ecosystem with a strong, proactive approach with access to the right data in a very timely, minute-by-minute manner. And that's a lot of that, not all of that. I'm not putting words in Kary's mouth, but a lot of that's what Kary and Kim have been talking about here today. Kary, we have got some resources as we start to wrap. I'm going to share those here. Folks, check out the Trucker Tools Fraud Toolkit, where you can kick the tires using that Learn More QR code there, and you can book a demo with the team to learn more about how it all works and what's in it for you, right? The with them. And then secondly, Kary, I bet you thrive on sidebar phone calls, Zoom calls, in-person meetings, you name it. And one of the ways you can track Kary down and also see the cool stuff she shares on social, especially LinkedIn, is you can connect with Kary right there via that QR code in front of you. Kary Jablonski with Trucker Tools and DAT. Kary, is that right? Is LinkedIn the best place to connect with you?
Best place to find me.
Best place, other than jogging trails, basketball courts. You know, now I got to ask you right before we wrap here. What's your when it comes to your game of basketball? What's your top skill? Is it the inside game or the outside game?
I'm relatively tall, so I'm a post player.
Okay, all right. Next trip up, Kim, we're gonna have a 2-on-2, and Kim's on my team. Kary will let you grab somebody, and we'll have a duke it out tournament. It is. Anyway, big thanks to Kary Jablonski with Trucker Tools and, of course, DAT. Kary, congrats on all the growth and success, and clearly a bright future forward. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate having me on.
We enjoyed it too. Very actionable, practical perspective here. Kim Reuter, enjoyed all of your practitioner color commentary. You and Kary are quite the 1-2 punch, my friend.
We had a little team going there. Thank you.
No doubt. No doubt. There's so much actionable perspective from Kary and Kim here today, right? Some great resources from Kary and the Trucker Tools and DAT organization. Take one thing, folks, just one thing at least from today's conversation, put it into practice, share it with your teams, your organizations, because it's not about lip service leadership. Deeds, not words, is how things change and get a whole lot better, including how we battle freight fraud out there. So with all that said, on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Join the Supply Chain Now community for more supply chain perspectives, news, and innovation. Check out supplychainnow.com, subscribe to Supply Chain Now on YouTube, and follow and listen to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts.